The photograph lived in Marcus Alvarez's wallet for 23 years. It was creased at the corners, faded at the edges, the colors bleeding into each other like watercolors left in the rain. His wife, Catalina, stood in front of a blue house in Oaxaca, one hand on her belly, the other shielding her eyes from the sun. Her smile was wide and certain, the smile of a woman who believed the future was written in light. Behind her, the mountains rose like sleeping giants. She'd been pregnant with Sofia when that photo was taken. 3 weeks later, she was gone, a car accident on a road that had claimed too many lives. Marcus had held the photograph every day since, pressing his thumb against her face like he could push time backward, like he could rewrite the moment. But he couldn't, so he'd made a promise instead. I will raise her. I will keep her safe. I will give her the life you dreamed for her. He'd kept that promise. The factory in New Jersey where Marcus worked had no windows. 8 hours a day, the sound of machinery grinding, hydraulics hissing, the smell of hot metal and machine oil coating his lungs. His hands had calluses layered on calluses, his back bent at angles that shouldn't be possible. His eyes had the glassy, unfocused stare of a man who'd learned to disappear into his labor. But when the shift ended at 11 p.m., Marcus became someone else. He became the man who picked up Sofia from the community center. He became the man who helped her with her calculus homework. Even though he barely understood it, he became the man who listened, really listened, when she talked about her day, her dreams, the boy from her English class who made her nervous. He became the man who'd built a wall between her and the world's cruelty, brick by brick, through every sacrifice he could make. Sofia was 17 now, beautiful in a way that made Marcus nervous, not because he didn't trust her, but because he understood men's eyes in ways he wished he didn't. She had her mother's cheekbones, her father's stubborn chin. She was fluent in both English and Spanish. She wanted to study engineering. She wanted to change the world. Marcus wanted to let her, but the world had other plans. It started small. A text from Sofia's friend Rosa saying she was scared to walk home. A missed call at 9:47 p.m. that Marcus found when he got back from the factory. A voice message, Sofia's voice tight and small. "Dad, I'm okay. I'm staying at Rosa's tonight. I'll call you in the morning." He didn't sleep that night. He'd learned, through 23 years of living in the margins of society, through watching the news with its endless parade of missing girls and no leads, that the small things were always warnings. The missed calls, the changed plans, the daughter who suddenly sounded like someone he didn't recognize. The next morning, Sofia came home with a story that didn't fit together right. Some boys from school had been hanging around. One of them had followed her and Rosa to the corner store. Nothing had happened. Everything was fine. But Marcus could see it in the way she wouldn't meet his eyes, in the way her hands shook when she poured her coffee, in the way she'd locked herself in her room immediately after breakfast. He knew his daughter. He knew when she was lying, and he knew why. Marcus started following her. It took 3 days. He'd adjusted his factory schedule, picked up evening shifts instead, told his supervisor his daughter needed him in the afternoons. The lie tasted like metal in his mouth, but it was necessary. Everything he did was necessary. On the 4th day, Sofia told him she was going to the library. Marcus watched from across the street as she walked past the library entrance and kept going, heading toward the warehouse district near the old port, where the buildings sagged like tired animals and the streets emptied after dark. His heart moved into his throat. He followed at a distance, keeping to the shadows, moving like a man who'd learned invisibility. Sophia had her phone out, texting. She glanced behind her twice, nervous. She turned a corner. Marcus quickened his pace. The warehouse was massive, its red brick face scarred with graffiti, its windows like dead eyes. Sophia stood outside it, waiting. Marcus positioned himself behind an abandoned truck, watching. His hands were trembling. A car pulled up. 3 men got out. Marcus recognized one of them, David or Diego, something like that. He went to Sophia's high school. He was 18, maybe 19. He had the kind of face that smiled while his eyes stayed cold. The other 2 men were older, perhaps in their 30s. They wore matching chains. One of them had a tattoo that crawled up his neck like a living thing. Marcus's body moved before his mind caught up. He was walking, then running, his legs eating up the distance. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have a weapon. He had nothing but a father's certainty that he would not let his daughter walk into whatever was waiting for her in that warehouse. "Sophia!" His voice cracked across the empty street. She spun around, her face shifting from anticipation to shock to something like shame. "Dad!" "Get behind me." The 3 men turned toward him slowly, like predators assessing a new threat. One of them laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "Who the fuck is this?" Marcus stepped between Sophia and the men. His body was a shield. It was 23 years of promises made solid and breathing. "This girl is not for you." "That's so?" The man with the neck tattoo stepped forward. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, the kind of body that was built for hurting people. "She was looking pretty interested 5 minutes ago." Marcus grabbed Sophia's hand without looking at her. "We're leaving." One of the men moved to block them. Marcus kept walking, kept Sophia behind him. His mind was moving in slow motion, calculating angles and distances, and the terrible mathematics of what happened when a man tried to protect his daughter against 3 younger, stronger men. He was about to find out. The punch came from the side. Marcus saw it in his peripheral vision, but couldn't move fast enough. It caught him on the temple, and the world tilted. He went down hard, his knee connecting with concrete. Pain blooming white and bright. Sophia screamed. Through the ringing in his ears, Marcus heard voices, rough hands grabbing Sophia, pulling her toward the warehouse. His daughter's voice, terrified. "Dad!" Something ignited in Marcus's chest. Something that had been sleeping for 23 years. Something that had been waiting. He pushed himself up, blood running warm down his face. The 3 men were focused on Sophia, on getting her inside, on whatever they'd planned for her in that dark place. Marcus did something he hadn't done since he was a younger man, a man without a daughter, a man without a reason to be careful. He fought. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't effective. He was smaller, slower, his body worn down by 2 decades of factory work. But he was desperate in a way that transcended technique. He threw himself at the man nearest to Sophia, wrapped his arms around him, and drove forward with everything he had left. They went down together, hitting the warehouse doorframe. Sophia was screaming. The other 2 men were laughing. And then Marcus was on the ground again, boots moving in, pain flowering through his ribs. He curled around himself, trying to protect his vital organs, trying to stay conscious. Through the blur of violence and shock, he heard a sound, deep, mechanical. The rumble of engines multiplying, growing louder. The boots stopped. The men paused, distracted, the sound of motorcycles, many of them, and now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The first bike came around the corner doing maybe 40 miles per hour, fast enough that the sound rattled windows. The rider was massive, broad-shouldered, wearing a cut with a red and white patch that meant something Marcus didn't understand. More bikes followed. 1, 2, 4, 8, 15. The three men scattered like roaches exposed to light, running toward the warehouse, toward anywhere that wasn't in the path of 50 motorcycles rolling down a street like a mechanical storm. Sophia ran toward Marcus, pulling him up, her hands shaking. "Dad! Oh God, Dad!" The lead bike stopped 10 feet from them. The engine cut out, leaving a ringing silence. The rider dismounted slowly, removing his helmet. He was in his 50s, maybe, his face weathered, his beard grey, his eyes the color of winter sky. On his cut, the patch identified him as President. "You okay, kid?" His voice was gravel and cigarettes. Sophia nodded, mute. The president looked at Marcus. Blood was dripping from Marcus's temple. His shirt was torn. One of his ribs felt like it was screaming. "That your girl?" "Yes." Marcus's voice came out as a whisper. "My daughter." The president nodded slowly, like Marcus had confirmed something important. More bikers were dismounting now, spreading out, creating a perimeter. Marcus recognized the language of their body language. They were looking for the three men. They had violence in their posture that made what had just happened to Marcus look like child's play. "What's your name, old man?" "Marcus. Marcus Alvarez." "I'm Hank. I lead this crew." Hank gestured to the motorcycles behind him. "Those three who were putting hands on your daughter, you know them. One is from her school." Hank nodded to one of his crew. The biker moved toward the warehouse without another word. Hank turned back to Marcus. "Here's how this is going to work. Those three are going to understand very clearly that what they were planning doesn't happen in this city. Your daughter is going to be safe, and you—" Hank paused, studying Marcus's face. "You made a choice today. You stood in front of your kid. You fought men bigger than you. You could have run. I don't run from my daughter." The words came out before Marcus could stop them. Something shifted in Hank's expression. He'd seen something in Marcus, something old and true and unbreakable. He'd recognized a man who kept promises. "Get on," Hank said, gesturing to his bike. "I don't. Get on! We need to get you looked at, and then we need to talk about family." Marcus looked at Sophia. She was still shaking, but she was safe. That was all that mattered. He climbed onto the back of Hank's motorcycle, his ribs screaming, his body broken. Around them the motorcycles roared to life, their engines creating a wall of sound that seemed to hold back the darkness itself. As they rolled through the streets of New Jersey, Marcus held onto the seat and watched the city slide past. Behind them, 150 motorcycles followed like a prayer made metal and noise. He didn't understand what was happening. He didn't know what Hank meant by family. He only knew that he'd made a choice in that warehouse, and choices had consequences. What happens next? How does a warehouse confrontation turn into a man finding his tribe? Stay tuned. The clubhouse wasn't what Marcus expected. He'd imagined something dark and dangerous, a place that smelled like violence and bad decisions. Instead, he found a sprawling brick building with Christmas lights strung across the porch, a leftover from holidays past, and the smell of coffee and something being cooked on a grill. The parking lot held motorcycles arranged like soldiers at attention, each one a work of art and rebellion. Hank led him inside, past men who nodded in greeting, past a bar made from what looked like reclaimed wood, past photographs on the walls, a visual history of the club stretching back decades. Some photos showed younger versions of the men around him, some showed the motorcycles from different eras, but many showed something else: funerals, weddings, children being born, men in hospital beds, being visited by crowds of leather and loyalty. Family, Marcus understood, was what was on those walls. A woman appeared, maybe Hank's age, her hair dyed red, her smile warm. "Come on, honey, let's get you cleaned up." She led Marcus to a bathroom and had him sit on the edge of the tub. She cleaned the blood from his face with surprising gentleness, her hands steady as she checked his ribs. "3 are cracked, I'd say. Not broken. You got lucky." She taped him up with practiced efficiency. "I'm Carol. My husband's a surgeon. He wanted to look at you, but Hank said you weren't the hospital type." "I'm not," Marcus said. "That's what I figured." Carol smiled. "Hank has good instincts about people. He says you got that look, the immigrant look. The I've survived worse than this look." Marcus didn't argue. When he emerged from the bathroom, the clubhouse had filled with people. The bikers were still there, but so were others, old ladies, as Carol called them, sitting at tables playing cards. A couple of kids were watching television in a corner. A man who introduced himself as Doc was barbecuing outside. It looked like a family gathering. It looked like home. Hank found him and handed him a beer. "Sit." They sat on the porch, watching the motorcycles gleam in the afternoon light. Hank didn't talk for a long time. Finally he said, "You fought those 3 men, smaller ones probably. You could have died." "I know, but you didn't think about it. You just moved. They had my daughter." Hank nodded slowly. "That's the thing about family, real family, not the blood kind. The chosen kind is that you'd die for it without hesitation. You'd fight impossible odds. You'd stand in front of danger and say, 'Not her. Take me instead.' That's what you did today." "I lost," Marcus said quietly. "No," Hank said. "You won. You held long enough for help to arrive. You made sure your daughter heard you come for her, no matter the cost. That's victory in the form that matters." Hank took a drink of his beer. "Those 3 men are going to have a very clear conversation with my club about what they tried to do. They're going to understand that some lines don't get crossed. And your daughter is going to know that if anything like this ever happens again, if anyone ever puts hands on her or any girl we care about, there are 200 of us who will remember." Lies, 200. Marcus felt the number like a weight. 150 here, 50 more in the next state over. We run deep, Marcus. We run long, and we look after our own. Hank turned to face him directly. "The question is, do you want to be part of that?" Marcus didn't understand. "I'm not a biker. I work in a factory." "Doesn't matter." Hank gestured around the clubhouse. "You see that guy over there?" He pointed to a man in his 70s sitting at the bar, nursing a whiskey. "That's Vincent. He was a librarian before he joined us." "And him?" "A younger man, maybe 30, with scars on his hands." "That's Carlos. He's a nurse at the hospital. We're construction workers, teachers, electricians, immigrants, felons, priests. We're everything. What matters isn't what you do. What matters is that you'd stand in front of danger for someone you love." "You're saying you want me to join your club?" "I'm saying you already did," Hank said. "The moment you stood between those men and your daughter, you became one of us. Now we're just making it official." 2 weeks passed. Sophia went back to school. Marcus went back to the factory. But everything was different now. When he walked through the neighborhood, people greeted him differently. Shop owners waved. The police officer on the corner nodded with something like respect. The boys who used to loiter outside Sophia's school had moved on to pray elsewhere. The club had begun appearing in Marcus's life in subtle ways. Hank stopped by the factory one day with lunch, sandwiches from a place on 10th Avenue, the good kind that cost money. Doc came by on Saturday and retaped Marcus's ribs, saying they were healing well. Carol called to ask if Sophia wanted to come by the clubhouse after school, that she was teaching some of the younger girls how to cook. On the 13th day, Marcus's phone rang at 11 p.m. It was Hank. "Get dressed, wear something dark, don't tell anyone where you're going." "What? 11:15, outside your apartment, come alone." The line went dead. Marcus's hands were shaking as he dressed. He knew what this might mean. He'd read enough stories, seen enough movies. New members had to be tested. They had to prove themselves. In the back of his mind, something ancient and fearful whispered, "This is where you find out what you've really joined." At 11:15, a motorcycle pulled up outside his building. The rider was a woman, the first female biker Marcus had seen in the club. She had arms covered in tattoos and eyes that had seen things. She handed him a helmet without speaking. He climbed on. They rode through the night, heading toward the outskirts of the city, where the buildings grew older and the streets grew emptier. The motorcycle slowed, turned down an alley. Ahead, Marcus saw lights, fires, a warehouse surrounded by at least 30 motorcycles. He climbed off, his heart hammering. The woman gestured for him to follow. Inside the warehouse, he found the 3 men who'd attacked Sophia. They were tied to chairs, bruised, terrified. In front of them stood Hank, and beside Hank stood Sophia. "Dad?" Her voice was shaking. "What?" "Sophia, go back to the car." Hank's voice was steel. "No," Sophia said, "I want to see." Marcus understood then. This wasn't about what he had to do. It was about what Sophia had to understand. That there were men in the world who hurt people, and there were men who made sure those men understood the cost. Hank stepped toward the 3 men. "You were going to rape this girl. You were going to hurt her in ways she couldn't come back from." His voice was quiet, which made it more terrible. Her father came for her, and when he couldn't save her alone, he had 200 brothers who came running. One of the men started to cry. "Here's what's going to happen," Hank continued. "You're going to understand with absolute certainty that any girl in this city is protected by us. You're going to leave this city. You're going to tell everyone you know that there are lines here that don't get crossed. And if you ever come back, if you ever even think about putting hands on someone we care about, the last thing you'll remember is the sound of 100 motorcycles." The men were all crying now. Marcus felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Carol standing beside him. "Your daughter needed to see that there are people who'll protect her," Carol said softly. "Now come on, let's get you both home." 3 months had passed since the warehouse when Hank called Marcus to the clubhouse on a Friday night. The place was crowded, 50 or 60 people, more than usual. When Marcus walked in, the crowd parted like water. Hank stood in the center of the room in his full colors, the red and white patch on his back, the colors that represented everything he stood for and everyone he'd bled with. "Marcus Alvarez," Hank said, his voice carrying across the room. "Step forward." Marcus moved through the crowd, his hands trembling slightly. He didn't know what was happening. He didn't know what Hank was about to ask of him. "In this club," Hank began, "we have a code. We have brothers and sisters who've stood with us through everything. We have a history written in 100 years of leather and loyalty. He paused. 3 months ago, a man stood between danger and someone he loved. That man fought impossible odds. That man didn't run, didn't hesitate, didn't calculate his chances of survival. He just moved. He just acted. Hank reached behind him, and Carol stepped forward with a cut, a motorcycle jacket, red and white, with the club patch on the back. Below it was a different patch, smaller, marking Marcus's position. "This is for you," Hank said. "This means your family. This means if you need us, we come running. And this means that if someone comes to us and needs you, we'll put you in front of them." Marcus took the jacket with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else. He put it on, and something shifted in his chest, something fundamental and irreversible. The crowd erupted in cheers. Men clapped him on the back. Carol hugged him. And Sophia, who'd been standing in the corner, Sophia, who'd become a regular at the clubhouse, who'd started helping Carol with cooking lessons, Sophia was crying. Later, when the celebration had wound down, Marcus stood outside on the porch wearing his colors. The motorcycles gleamed in the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. The city hummed with its endless, violent energy. Hank appeared beside him with 2 beers. "You made a promise," Hank said. 23 years ago. You promised your wife you'd protect your daughter. You kept that promise. And now you have 150 people who made the same promise. You don't have to carry it alone anymore." Marcus drank his beer and looked at his jacket, at the colors that now meant something. He thought about his wife, about the photograph that had lived in his wallet for so long. He thought about how the universe sometimes answered prayers, but not in the way you expected. Like this video, if you believe that real family is the people who show up when it matters. Comment below if you've ever found your tribe. The letter came on a Tuesday morning. Marcus didn't recognize the handwriting at first. His name was written on the envelope in careful block letters, the address correct, but the style old-fashioned, like someone had spent time thinking about how to address it. Inside, Marcus found a single page of lined notebook paper, and below it, the photograph. The same photograph of Catalina that had lived in his wallet for 23 years. But this one was different. This one had been enlarged, professionally framed, and laminated with care. And the letter said, "Dear Mr. Alvarez, my name is David Chen. I was one of the 3 men in that warehouse. I want you to know that I understand now what I was doing. I understand what I was going to do. And I understand why it was wrong. After that night, after the club made sure I understood the cost of my actions, I left the city. I've been in rehab for drugs. I've been seeing a therapist. I've been doing the work of becoming someone different than I was. I'm telling you this, not to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve that. I'm telling you this because your daughter deserves to know that there are fewer predators in the world than there were before. And that's because of you, because you stood between danger and someone innocent. I wanted you to have the photograph back. It was taken from your wallet that night. I kept it for months. I don't know why. But I realized it was a reminder of what I'd stolen, what I'd tried to take. I'm returning it now because I think it belongs with you. I'm moving to California. I'm going to stay away from this city, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be better than I was. Respectfully, David Chen. Marcus sat in the kitchen for a long time, holding the photograph. His hands were shaking, not with anger this time, but with something else. Something like redemption reflected back at him from an unexpected source. Sophia found him there an hour later. She was home from school, her backpack heavy with calculus and biology, and all the weight of a daughter who was becoming someone. She saw the photograph and recognized it immediately. "Is that your mother?" Marcus said. "When she was carrying you." Sophia sat down beside him. She studied the photograph like it was new, like she was seeing her mother for the first time. She would have liked what happened. The club, everything. She would have liked that you weren't alone. "I was always afraid I was doing it wrong," Marcus said. "Raising you alone, working all those hours, never having enough to give you what you deserved." "Dad," Sophia said, and her voice held all the maturity of someone who'd learned early that love was more important than money. "You gave me everything. You gave me a father who'd fight for me. That's everything." Marcus put the photograph in a frame. He set it on the shelf in the living room, next to the framed picture of Sophia graduating, surrounded by bikers in their colors. The two photographs existed in conversation with each other now, one from the past, one from the present, both telling the story of how a man keeps his promises. 6 months after receiving the letter, Marcus received a call from Hank. "We're going on a run," Hank said. "Weekend trip to Virginia. Bring Sophia if she wants to come. Some of the other young people are coming." Sophia was excited about it in a way that reminded Marcus of before the warehouse, before the fear. She packed quickly, changed into jeans and a T-shirt with the club's logo on it, and climbed onto the back of Carol's bike when they arrived at the clubhouse. The run involved 43 motorcycles, a winding route through mountain roads, and a destination that turned out to be a children's hospital. The bikers, in their full colors, walked through the corridors like lions wearing leather, but they moved softly. Carefully, they brought gifts, toys, games, books. They sat beside children with bald heads and tubes, and the kind of exhaustion that shouldn't exist in anyone so young. Marcus sat beside a boy maybe 8 years old who'd been fighting cancer for 3 years. The boy looked at Marcus's colors and said, "You're a real biker." "Yes." "That's cool," the boy said. "Are you the leader?" "No. I'm new. I'm learning still." "What do you do?" Marcus thought about this. What did he do? He worked at a factory. He'd raised a daughter alone. He'd stood between danger and someone he loved. He'd joined a family that had chosen him. "I keep promises," Marcus said, "and I show up when people need me." The boy nodded like this made perfect sense. "That's what my dad does too, except he's a fireman." They sat together in silence, watching other bikers interact with other children. Sophia appeared with Carol, both of them carrying juice boxes and smiles. When it was time to leave, the boy held Marcus's hand and said, "Come back. Tell me stories about the motorcycles." "I will," Marcus said, and he meant it. On the ride back, Marcus found himself thinking about legacy. Not in the grand sense of buildings or monuments, but in the sense of moments. The moment he'd stood in a warehouse and said, "Take me instead." The moment Hank had placed the cut on his shoulders. The moment Sophia had looked at him with pride instead of fear. The moment a sick child had held his hand and believed that a man in a leather jacket could be someone good. They rode through the night, the 43 motorcycles creating a river of light and sound. Behind him, Sophia held on tight to Carol's waist and didn't seem afraid. Above them, the stars were incredible, clear and vast, and indifferent to human suffering or human love. But Marcus felt held by something larger than himself, Something that had nothing to do with the stars and everything to do with the roar of engines and the presence of people who decided to stand together. 1 year had passed since the warehouse when Hank called a full club meeting. 200 people filled the clubhouse, every member, every old lady, every prospect, every person who'd made the choice to belong. Marcus stood among them in his colors, and it still felt surreal. This man who'd crossed an ocean illegally, who'd worked in factories and saved every dollar, who'd raised his daughter alone and built a life from nothing, now belonged to something. Hank called the meeting to order. He stood at the front, his beard grey, his cut worn in the places that mattered, his presence absolute. "We have a lot to celebrate," Hank began. "We've protected our territory, we've grown our family, we've shown up for people who needed us." He paused. "But today, we're here for something different. Today, we're recognizing one of our own for embodying what this club means." Hank gestured to Marcus. Marcus moved forward, confused. This wasn't planned. He didn't understand what was happening. "Marcus Alvarez joined us not because he wanted to be a biker," Hank said. "He joined us because he loved his daughter more than he loved safety. He joined us because, at a moment when it mattered, he didn't calculate the cost. He just moved. He just fought. He just stood between danger and innocence." Hank pulled out a photograph, the same photograph from that first night at the clubhouse, taken by Carol. It showed Marcus covered in blood, standing in front of Sophia, his body a shield. "This photograph is going on the wall, downstairs, where we keep the pictures of our best moments, not because violence is our ideal, but because standing for something, standing for someone, that's our ideal. And Marcus Alvarez did that, without hesitation, without calculation." The room erupted in cheers. Men clapped Marcus on the back so hard he nearly fell over. Carol hugged him. Sophia, standing in the back of the room, was crying. Later that night, after the meeting had ended and most people had gone home, Marcus found himself alone on the porch with Hank. They sat on the edge of the deck, their feet dangling, watching the empty parking lot and the motorcycles waiting like sleeping giants. "You ever regret it?" Hank asked. "Regret what?" "Joining us." Marcus thought about this. He thought about his wife, about the photograph that had lived in his wallet. He thought about his daughter, who now had 150 protectors. He thought about the boy in the hospital who'd asked him to come back. He thought about the meaning of family, not the family you're born into, but the family you choose. "No," Marcus said. "Never." "Good," Hank said, "because you're stuck with us now. Your family, and family, real family, that's forever." Marcus looked at his hands. They were still calloused from the factory, still bearing the scars of that night in the warehouse. But they were also the hands of a man who'd kept his promise, the hands of a man who'd stood between danger and someone he loved. The hands of a man who'd learned that sometimes courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being so full of love for someone else that fear becomes irrelevant. He pulled the photograph of Catalina from his jacket pocket. He carried it with him always now, though not in his wallet. He carried it in his heart. He looked at his wife's face, frozen in time, her smile certain, her belief in the future absolute. "I kept my promise," he said silently, "and I found my family along the way." The motorcycles gleamed in the darkness. The city hummed around them. And Marcus Alvarez, immigrant, factory worker, father, biker, sat on the porch of a clubhouse and understood finally that he was home. Thank you for watching. Marcus's story is one of 100 like it in this club. If you want to hear more stories about family, loyalty, and what real brotherhood means, Please subscribe, and remember, family isn't who you're born to, it's who shows up when it matters.